Welcome to the Scaleup Valley podcast, where we bring the best of the best to help you scale your business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today's guest is Daniel, the CEO at DasLab. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike, for having me. Hello.
It's really a pleasure, and I'm really impressed by the track records and the journey so far. And I'm sure that it will be a very interesting episode for the community, and looking forward to have fun with you during this episode. So let us know more about you and DasLab.
Sure. So I'm Daniel. I'm a bit of a healthcare animal. So I started my career more on the industrial side, so working for Siemens Healthineers, Medtronic, and the more and more I moved into entrepreneurship, and then we founded DasLab in 2020, where we saw a big need, not just because of COVID, to be honest, already longer before, that access to lab testing is something that is not trivial, and where many predominantly digital health providers want to get access to health testing, to medical testing. And this is exactly what we do. So in summary, we built Strive for Diagnostics. That's what DasLab is.
That's incredible. And definitely as a patient, I can see all the hurdle. If I want to go to one lab one time and to another lab, then I can't have the lab tests in the same place. Then I need to show the same lab tests and send into different professionals. So it can definitely be a nightmare. So I really resonate with the problem that you are solving, and let us know more about the solution. So how are you solving that problem?
So in general, we're solving it. It's a platform model. So in a super simplistic model, we're connecting the demand side of testing, so the provider side, with the supplier side. So that means with the sample takers, phlebotomists, and the labs and logistics providers. And we sit in the middle with a tech platform that connects those parties with each other. That's basically what it is. And the whole product behind it is API first. So that means, we're really API driven, because most of those providers want to have their own user experience. But we have this strong tech as a core. That's what we are.
Got it. It's much more the infrastructure is on your side, yes, but they still have the kind of the front office and their brand intact, let's say.
Exactly.
Got it. So the main ICP, is it kind of a marketplace, or is it mainly the labs that are your clients at this stage?
It's, how to say, we have both. So we're building it more driven by the demand. So that means more by the provider side. They want to get this access, and they want to get access to countrywide testing oftentimes. And that's something that you don't get, but we see that labs are highly interested in entering into new fields of growth, where they, based on their technology stack, on how to say, their archives, the systems, also their current business logic, what they have, where it's not easy to integrate with them. So they more and more understand that we are a strong partner for them, but it's more driven by the demand side, so by the providers.
Got it. Sounds great. And in terms of geographies, you are now present in Germany and Spain, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, Germany. Well, Germany is a home market. All we found is we love complexity, and healthcare is complex, and Germany as a healthcare system is complex, but it's big. Spain, we love. It's a market that is, I would say, sometimes a bit, although we are in the same regulatory environment, it's easier to drive innovation. It has a strong market size, and the problem in some ends is even bigger. So there's even more paper involved on several ends. So that's why we also love Spain quite a lot.
Got it. Sounds great, and definitely Spain is an interesting market, also with the connection with LATAM as well. But we can discuss it a little bit later in the podcast when we go through the kind of the expansion strategy lessons. And of course, any entrepreneur, when is considering to start a company and even to scale a company, it's important to have clear the different segments that we might want to attack from the overall TAM. So, and also the timing, right? So the timing is something very difficult to crack. So why do you think this is the right timing to solve this problem?
Yep, I think many factors play a role here. So number one is, look at telehealth, telemedicine providers. They've been starting 10 years ago, but suddenly we had COVID. And what happened in COVID, suddenly we had an access problem to healthcare. And those providers, they immediately saw massive growth in numbers. And of course, they're strongly limited of what they can provide to their patients. So what they are all looking for is access to diagnostics, because I think one number that is interesting for everybody listening to this podcast is that 70% of medical decision-making is driven by or influenced by medical lab results. 70%, it's a huge number.
Yeah.
And if you look at healthcare provision, at the moment, it's not yet fully digital. And those providers who founded 10 years ago, they now see a strong opportunity to expand their service offering, and there's a need, and there's this massive growth in that industry happening at the moment, driven by COVID. So COVID was a positive shock, I would call it, to the healthcare ecosystem.
And definitely this is also one of the issues in the industry, because there is a temptation to prescribe some drug or medication before seeing what is going on a deeper level with the person that is in front of us. So sometimes even the 70% is low compared to what it should be, right? So there is still a huge opportunity to even expand more the time there.
And to connect it, so the one thing is we start digital, those providers, they're tech savvy, they love to think bold, they want to cover a market. But definitely we see a strong need also for more classical providers, that expand maybe into telemedicine, but are classical GPs or specialists. If I look at Spain or Germany, I see those developments. Look at Abi Medical in Germany, look at what Dr. Lipp is doing, they're strongly growing into first screen solutions in front of the doctor. And they're all going to be, challenged soon with how do I integrate with that lab. It's not just this lab integration. So it's more about this, how can you as a patient, Mike, how do you walk along a path? And, at the moment, a lot of paper stuff, this is what we solve. Yeah,
and typically receiving the lab tests over email and forwarding.
At best, if you don't receive it, there are still great opportunities to receive it via letter or fax, if you want. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm already
in the email version, and it's definitely a nightmare. And some of the emails come with a PDF with a password. Some of them no. So yeah, I've seen a lot of versions of this.
And one thing maybe more important. So let's assume we would overcome this hurdle. Every lab has a certain lab information system. That coding philosophy behind it is not unified. So even if you would take one lab result from one lab and the second one from the second, you cannot technically, if you want to automize, if you want to build a longitudinal trend, you cannot simply merge them. It does not work. So a very strong core of the need, and also, that the market that we are addressing is this interoperability piece of the platform. That means we're unifying these standards. And ultimately, to those new providers, we always deliver, Fire, Loink, and SNOMED-based data. But we know, so to say, the labs are super fragmented, super archaic. They don't have that, but we are this unifying platform in the middle for this. So there's a strong tech piece to that.
I imagine. I would say that's the nightmare and also the moat of what you are building, right? So that's what keeps you awake at night. But at the same time, if you solve that piece, that's great, because it's very difficult for other players to compete with you, right?
Correct. Exactly. That's the mode.
So, and what is the big dream in the long term? Where would you like to see DasLab in 5 years, let's say?
5 years in healthcare is pretty short, to be honest. That's my personal view. But
let's say the next 10 years.
Yeah. So the way I look at it, first of all, let's solve this infrastructure problem. I think if we do great, there is a massive value add in itself. But for sure, if let's assume we go into a market, we have, different tasks in different sectors of care operated by us ultimately. What we then suddenly can do is we can connect the dots. That means, we can standardize, we can unify those test results, we can build a longitudinal data trend for you, Mike, for example, on a personal level. Mm-hmm. And what then comes next is if you have a very strong data standard behind it, what you can then do is you can use AI and other, machine learning and so on to offer clinical decision support, because our motivation, mine, but also from other co-founders, is we want to increase better the outcomes of the patients. And we truly believe that this will happen by connecting the dots along a pathway and taking really knowledge out of longitudinal trends, which is super important for lab testing. And this is where I guess we can play a role, where we can also be a partner for other innovative companies coming in that space and looking for an infrastructure to plug into, to then run their algorithms. It does not necessarily have to be all proprietary DasLab IP, but we have the infrastructure to plug in and to run this. That's the dream, I guess, and to offer ultimately doctors better basis for medical decisions.
I love it. So that's definitely a great vision, and almost being able to predict or advise how patients of a certain segment get better, or what typically when you show those values on lab tests, maybe you might have this condition, or maybe there is a lot of opportunities there. I'm not sure.
A big one, if I may, a big one is, for example, look at, for example, we look at the moment heavily into like population health management. Mm-hmm. Like if you think about cancer prevention, look at the way it's performed at the moment, look at the different kinds, which is test heavy. We just saw numbers from health insurance companies, big ones, which you think are doing big, but they have compliance rates in the lower tens, So that means there are like 80-90% of the cohort are not covered. So I think what we can add to that is, but this takes longer, is really managing a cohort, for example, in the prevention space, better, more efficient, and deliver also a data set which then ultimately can help also science and R&D driven companies to then hopefully build, for example, better pharmaceuticals and so on. So this is for me also personally a very long-term vision of the company. But we have to start this today because there are long lead times for that.
And what do you think is the midterm vision for the company?
First of all, midterm vision is we want to be the market leader in Europe. That means we want to be the first and the leading vendor neutral platform or infrastructure platform for medical testing in Europe first. I think that's until 2025, that is realistic. And then let's see, you mentioned other markets we can discuss later, but Europe is our core for sure.
Got it. So, and of course we couldn't talk about any startup or scale up without discussing the initial stages and building the team, and the founding team is really what matters for a startup, and later for a scale up. It's all about the leadership team. With all respect, of course, to the overall team, but if the leadership is not in place and setting a good culture and a good example, it would be difficult to attract the best into the company. So in general, we always say that we should have, if we have two co-founders, we should have a business person and a more technical technology person. In digital health, there is this extra complexity that we also need to have someone who knows the medical side. What's your view, and what was the way that you build your own founding team for DasLab, and what are your tips for other digital health companies that you have been speaking with?
That's a good one. So if you look at our current operational founding structure, that's 3 people. So it's me, driving more the strategic initiatives, setting the vision, but driving the commercial side, the business development, with a strong background in understanding the regulatory and the reimbursement landscape, not just in Germany, but in Europe. We have a product lead, Jeremy, our co-founder. He's leading all product related topics. That does not just mean, the design, user experience of it, but also the regulatory piece of it. So both of us, we've been get certified, a class 2A digital medical device in our previous company. So I think this knowledge is great to have because healthcare is complex in digital health as well. And we have a tech person who predominantly comes more from a consumer background, but that is great in terms of thinking because, the healthcare oftentimes things very limited in terms of cloud and stuff like that, And, if you look at in the consumer world, it's all standard. So I think merging this all together, and baking something in a highly regulated environment is definitely, I guess, for us, a strong key for success that we have those 3 different characters in the team. And Etienne, our CTO, for example, I think is serial CTO, founded already, 6 companies. So this is an experience great to have in the team. And we have a non-operational founder who was there in the onset. He's part of the board, Björn von Siemens. He's a long-standing digital health entrepreneur since 10 years. So both of us, we've with the 2 of us, the idea was born, and we love this complexity, but we also don't underestimate this complexity in healthcare. So I think this is the dream on the one side, the vision, to dream big, but understanding what are limitations. I always call this the red lines, and sailing very closely to those red lines. Having that in the team, at least for DasLab, I can say we have those characters, and this is, I think, the key success criteria, maybe also for others.
Got it. And it's really impossible. And I think that with digital health, this becomes even more difficult to have all the ads on the founding team. In that case, we would need to have almost 6, 7, 8 people in the founding team, which is too much. But the good news is that we can have, as you said, an advisory board. We can have not only the advisors, but also key employees later, also with equity that we can attract later. It also helps to be a small team in the beginning to make it easier to align on strategic decisions and to go faster.
Yeah, we combine this in the beginning. We combine this, as business angels and senior advisors. We have, for example, former C-suite members of big lab groups, in Europe, part of the advisory board. They joined month number 3, where we just, phrased out a bit the vision and so on. They were already on board as the guys exactly on the right thing. So we have those super seniors. And for sure, once you come at a certain growth stage, and I guess we somewhat hit that line, it's about how do you scale the founders? It's exactly what you were saying. Hire great people who can take away also the limitation that we simply have of being a bottleneck. And we understood very early that we have to hire great people, basically, and we don't say on levels, but we hire great people around us, which then form the leadership team of the company to really drive this.
Absolutely. And there is something that I know that you really enjoy to talk about, which is nowadays we have a lot of unicorns out there, and given the complexity of the health space, it might take a little bit more time in order to achieve the same kind of vision. So what are your views in terms of attracting talent who wants to stay not only for 1 or 2 years, but for the long run in a digital health venture?
I think, first of all, so we very early on, we invested quite a bit of thinking into what are our core values, and of course, if you're in a healthcare, it's very strong purpose-driven, impact-driven. And that what we understand from people, that's very attractive to them. So as we speak today now, in May 2022, we realize people also, for example, from this super fast moving consumer world, there was something happened in the last years. I don't know if it's healthy, but others should look at that. But we realized there are people out there who want to do something more that is more impact driven, purpose driven. Those people we want, those people we incentivize in the way. So that means also we incentivize them with virtual shares, with a certain vesting period. But we have explicitly many people who actively say, guys, if I come on, then I really want to be here for the long run. And you see it from the CV. They don't hop from company to company. They've been staying somewhere 3, 4, 5 years, and then they come to us. Of course, then they are more senior. We're happy to have more senior people in the team. We also pay them nicely, I guess, but they get this virtual component on top. With that, so far, we haven't lost somebody. Yeah, of course, we had to let go some people, which we thought were not the right fit for the company, but there was nobody who left the company so far, and I think that's a very strong proof point of our strategy and the sector we're in.
Sounds great, Daniel. And in terms of headcount, where are you now?
Currently, we have 45 people. Not all of them fixed hired, so we also have techies, for example, with us since 2 years on a contract basis. Of course, we also have a team that still does COVID, so that's like a BU in the company. There's like 6, 7 people in the company that only solely focuses on this one. But we have to plan to grow a little bit more, but I think we're quite big for a seed stage company already, so it's okay.
Definitely, that's quite impressive. And jumping into almost the fundraising topic in that perspective, you just raised 7.1 million seed round. How has been your experience in terms of fundraising? So we were discussing just how that is important to attract talent that is in the venture for the long run, who is connected with the purpose of the company. What has been your experience on choosing investors to be your partners and understanding what are the investors that understands well the industry and the speed of the industry?
Yeah, first of all, there is always the question, how do you want to finance yourself? And I think there are different strategies. Number one is bootstrapping. Number two, if you don't take external investors on board, is either you go the VC route, if you want to attract a lot of money, or you go to strategic investors. We decided to go down the VC route. And that is important for some talent also, because if you get strong investors on board who have really domain knowledge in that area, that in itself is already a confirmation of the attractiveness of the industry, and talent is looking for that. And so I wouldn't say we selected at the end the VCs for that, basically in that light, but it was a certain for us decision factor, and that's why we have now an investor board that is comprising quite strong investors in that digital health space. So they know the space, they know the timelines. Also, they know it takes a bit longer than 2 years to exit and stuff like that, or achieve unicorn. So that was important to us because we want to align these different timelines also externally, what we then try to do internally.
And would you add any other lessons to founders who are listening to us and considering fundraising in the initial stages of their ventures? I think that's something really interesting here, is that you have jumped at the pre-seed rounds, and now it's very common for companies to raise the pre-seed rounds. And I think that would be interesting to share. Why did you decide to go that way?
Well, number one, we founders put cash on the table very early on. We took additional risk. That's one important fact. The other thing was we were glad we had an MVP live after 6.5 weeks post foundation. And of course, in COVID, we had a COVID product, and that gave us nice cash flow. So that didn't initially drive us, to didn't get loads of money in the beginning. So we were able to bootstrap quite a bit. And then we, as that was running quite stable, we said, okay, let's then focus really on what we really want to build, and I've always wanted to build if COVID wouldn't have come. And with that, I should say, fine-tuned vision then, also, the next evolution of the products that we plan and the strategy behind it. Then we went fundraising, showing already the traction that we have, and that brought us ultimately to that nice round that we closed.
Sounds great. In terms of the process of, there are some entrepreneurs that would advise to try to compress the fundraising process as much as possible to generate some competition, and also to make the process smoother, to dedicate less time to the fundraising instead of just going through months and months of fundraising. So what were your tips there and your approach there in terms of the fundraising process?
A very good tip. We didn't do it this way. I would do it. I would, and I will do it differently next time. This is exactly at best. You're super prepped. Number one, that's my takeaway and our takeaway. Be super prepped. Have all the material in the data room. Have a clear strategy whom you want to talk with. So have short lists, whatever. Have a timeline and give it a clear start and give it a clear end. And communicate this also. And then have a first week of intro calls, let's see who wants to do deep dive calls, who wants to go into DD or in the data room. And if that is not, picking up in terms of numbers, conversion is not good, let's take the next intro round. So keeping that super condensed is also our takeaway, is something that we definitely want to do going forward. The reason is very simple. My time and our time is super limited. And at the end, we should build a company. Fundraising should not be our key component of what we're doing. We want to spend time with customers. We want to develop a great product and launch this. Fundraising is important and should always be fun for the founders. It's oftentimes super painful. For me, for me personally, this pain is also certain fun. I get a lot of good feedback from investors, but have this planned, super crisp. I think definitely also to ourselves a key recommendation.
That's a good point, because in general, or the typical playbook would say that you would be raising every 18 months, which means that we need to have good metrics in the first 12 months of the 18 months period. So then we can get very well prepared to have, let's say, 3 months of fundraising, and still have the 3 months of oxygen if anything goes wrong, and we need to find a B plan, which is not a nice scenario to consider. So I forgot where I was going, to be honest.
But I can add to that. So at the moment, my personal view on the market is, last year markets were super crazy. Last year the 18 months were rather 12. Exactly. So people raised money with a PowerPoint, massive money. I think this time is gone, not completely, but there will always be great ventures who can do it. But in the bigger scale as we saw it, I think this number one is I think gone, and so that drives us also to think more a bit long-termish. Everybody that I speak with at the moment, other co-founders and founders, they think of expanding a bit runway. So taking a little bit more time, because we do not know what uncertainty the market environment will bring, everything that's happening out there. So I think that's my impression, we go back a little bit more into that 18-month time period again. And of course, the implication at the moment is also we are super crisp on managing the money. So that means, of course, we also had to let go then to people where we said, they're not super essential going forward. They were great to have, but not long term. So let's look at resources now. And so we're super conscious in cash management, and we're also thinking, okay, do we feel comfortable runway and stuff like that? And I feel there's more other founders thinking somewhat aligned. So this fundraising, the way of thinking, the timelines and stuff has recently changed a bit again.
What I was saying is really to confirm what you were saying, that fundraising consumes a lot of energy and focus from the founder. CEO is typically leading the fundraising process, and at the end of the day, as you were saying, we need to keep building the the company, and it's difficult to do both at the same time, and that's why the importance of having a strong team around us, because sometimes the CEO really needs the team to keep building the business while he's focused on the fundraising process, and typically with another person or more helping him or her on the process, right? Other thing that I see,
we have this as well. We also have a founders associate, who is, I think, at peak time in fundraising, 100% of his time is fundraising,
right.
And he's always doing a little bit of that, because after the fundraise is before the fundraise, so he takes care of more the operational and now also stakeholder management, investor management. Yes, but this having a strong team around you that still the company is growing and the business is building is, I think, also super important.
Super important, definitely. So let's jump into the expansion strategy that the time is going on, and there is always so much stuff to cover, and I like to go deeper into the topic so we can share as much value as possible with our listeners. But in terms of expansion strategy, we were discussing about the angle of course, you started in Germany, expanded into Spain. There is also an angle with LATAM. There is always the big dream in this sector about the US and other exotic opportunities. So what's your take and what's your view in terms of considering your geographical expansion in the case of DasLab?
Well, number one, let's first be a leader in our two markets where we're in. Number one. Number two, we work with big partners on supply and demand side, which I think want to grow with us, and where we want to grow with them. So we have in some contracts that we just signed in the last 2 weeks already in their regional expansion. Mm-hmm. So what would be natural? UK, France, Italy, those are the big countries in Europe that you may want to look at. But as we are active in Spain, for sure, we know quite a lot, and also our leader, for example, in leading the Spanish market, he has strong experience from Latin. We know that the pain and the need in Latin America is quite high. So in terms of language, of course, not in all of them, but think about Mexico, Brazil, and stuff. The natural extension into those countries, right, for us is quite natural. US is of course always a topic, and we see quite many European, also digital health startups. Think about Babylon as number one, maybe who made it over there super well. Is definitely a way to go, but we are always very, how should I say, deliberately deciding what is this, also what is the pain, what can be our solutions, a product market fit, right, what is competition. And something very important for us is we always want to have then people in those countries to kickstart it. And then it oftentimes depends in finding the right talent to kickstart it. Because if you're not there, our lesson was, if you're not there with people, we tried it in UK, for example, and that was why we failed in UK in the early days. We didn't have the right people there on the ground. So that's my lesson learned. But let's first, do good in the two countries. Let's scale from there. And then the rest, I guess, will follow. The demand that we see at the moment is already super big. And also this expansion doesn't stress us at all, because in COVID, we are active, I think, in 25 countries in Europe already. So we do loads of business in many, many different countries, but with that beyond COVID product, which is the core of the company, there we really focus.
Yeah, this is a really important lesson learned. I think that radical focus is super, super critical. The difficult part is how do we adopt that mindset and how do we implement that mindset. And there is always this feeling that we need to increase the amount of markets that we are playing in, because we believe that we will have better results. But that's, in healthcare, fear, right?
Yeah, in healthcare, the thing is, it's a bit different. In consumer, it's easier, but in a highly regulated world in healthcare, there are regulations. You have to understand them. You have to cope with them. You have to build some very bespoke, oftentimes business model for certain countries. So the barrier for entry is quite high.
That's true.
And that's why we don't jump on that. And of course, we also have this all the time, and we discuss a lot, but at the end, it's this really relentless focus on those 2 countries at the moment. And every day we learn more and more where we thought we already know it. In Spain, in Germany, we always learn more, and we always get a bigger network. And with that, with the longer sales cycles in healthcare, you have to really be deeply linked in those countries. Otherwise, you only scratch the surface somewhere here and there. That's our position. You really want to go deep. Yeah.
Definitely great points there. And I really enjoyed that I was challenging you and you were saying Spain and Germany, Spain and Germany. So I think that's a great attitude and a great attribute for a leader. So let's go into the final segment of the show, where I ask a quick question and you give me a quick answer, please. And if you would have the opportunity to meet Daniel in 2020 and have a coffee with him, what advice would you offer to your younger self?
In 2020, when we found it, be a bit more bold, take more risk, and have fun in doing that. There is not much well, if things go wrong, you can always try to fix them. So simply try it, but have a strong character also, that is something, and you can somewhat train that a little bit, but be bold and simply try things.
Love it. What are you the most proud of on your journey so far?
Well, that we, at the end, and I look briefly at COVID, we delivered more than 700,000 test results in COVID. Wow. In a pandemic. So that means it's not 700,000 people, it's less because we have repetitive tests, but that means we helped quite a substantial number of people to live a healthier and, a healthier life in the midst of a pandemic. That's what I'm absolutely most proud of. Well, the other thing is we're building something that will ultimately help people and will help patients to be healthier, to keep them healthy and not even to be, in sick care. That is a strong motivation going forward. But this is for all of us in the founding team in the company. This is a core thing. Deliver value to patients. Super important.
Love it. Worst advice ever received?
When being an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Worst advice ever received? That's a challenging one. It's a good one. One guy told me, he was coming from big in health insurance. He joined a startup on a C-level, and he said, look, why do you care about fundraising? It's so super easy. Why don't you simply do it? Money is everywhere. I said, okay, seriously, did you raise in your life one single euro of VC money? He said, no, but it's easy. And I said, seriously, shut up. You have no experience in that, so it's not that easy. But, that was for me somewhat one of the craziest moments that I had so far. And that told me a little bit, so people he came from corporate, big insurance, he was leading even, a country there. They oftentimes, I think they bring great knowledge into us, but they're lagging a little bit the understanding of what it means to be an entrepreneur, to take that risk super early on and to build that company, It was not advice, but it alerted me at that time and it made me a bit angry, to be honest.
Yeah. And it's difficult as a founder to filter what can help us and what can't help us, or what can confuse us even more. And sometimes we are clear about what needs to be done, and we get confused with the wrong advice that's at the wrong timing. So sometimes it's very dangerous. And that's why I ask this kind of question. So
if I may add my last thing,
of course.
To that, I try to keep it short, but I start beginning, I talk with a lot of people, but as you said, this trust of people, that can advise us is very important. And that's why the number of people that are really, that I'm also actively reaching out is very small, but I do this, I personally have a coach this is something for me very personal to grow.
Congratulations. Yeah.
But also, our seniors and advisors and stuff. So there's a small group where you have to learn, what advice you can get, and then use them actively. That's the way I try to be, how should I say, stay away from the ones that I just mentioned.
Exactly. Favorite book?
Factfulness.
Wow. I need to take that one from, the author.
I have to look it up. It's a Swedish health economist, and it's super interesting. Do the quiz in the beginning with the monkeys, and you're gonna see whether you're smarter or not as smart as a monkey. Healthcare we in healthcare know so little about the healthcare system, where we think we know so much about it. Test your knowledge, and the whole thing is think, do some calculation, maybe on a sheet of paper, but think, and then just take your answer, and not before. And that's important in healthcare, but that shows the complexity of it. Factfulness, super nice book.
Really enjoying the resources segment, always learning and finding new resources to read. So favorite movie or series?
I must say series. It's I try not to watch that much of TV, but when I'm traveling, for example, I loved Suits, because it's the fun of fun of negotiating. Because negotiations are always a conflict, and if you enjoy that conflict, then you're a good negotiator, and that's something that keeps me. What did I really like with that?
Good point. Favorite podcast excluding this one?
I try not, I don't listen too much to podcasts. I try to really build knowledge. So there is one in Germany that focuses a lot on science. And this is, I have to honestly look up exactly what its name is, but they're really like 45 minutes going into one super specific area, like, I don't know, renewable fuel for planes or something, and 45 minutes just around this.
Wow.
So I try to listen to stuff that is outside healthcare, but innovation driven. I think it's SWR Wissen or something like that. I can watch it up if you want. I like that quite a lot.
Perfect. Thank you, Daniel. We can always add to. Are you still looking, or?
It's SWR Wissen. It is. It's super German. But
got it. So for the German listeners, you can follow. I believe that the others, it will be difficult for them to find it out. Even if you find it out, then you need to understand German, right?
What I can recommend next to listening to a podcast is read scientific papers.
Got it.
Read it. It's super painful, but I did my PhD in corporate finance, but sometimes you have to drill super deep, not just scratch the surface. Read a scientific paper from the beginning to the end. That is something really that triggers my mind. So I try to rather do that.
Awesome. Daniel, thanks so much for making the time to join us today and sharing your journey so far. It was really a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks, Mike, for having me.
And to our community, we keep bringing you the best of the best and inspiring you to make your life a little bit easier, starting and scaling up your company. See you soon, and keep scaling.